So there's this business owner, entrepreneur named, who I'm just going to call Timothy, just sent me an email, and I wanted to reply to Timothy's email, and I thought it would be helpful to do this in public. So here's what Timothy says. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. I'm having a tough time with something that I think is a great thing, right? And here's what Timothy's struggling with. I don't really want to go to conferences at the moment, right? I don't really want to sit in on workshops or mastermind groups. I feel like I've done enough learning until I implement what I believe is important. And I don't love the idea of adding more to that list. Is this crazy? Timothy asks. I've always had a huge focus on continuing improvement and staying up to date with the industry. I'm just reading, that's why I'm looking down. Staying up to date with our industry. And oddly, I feel guilty that I don't want to do that anymore than the minimum in terms of community and whatever is required for, in quotes, getting better. I would love your input, Carl. This is such a great question. So I wanted to reply. Let me pull up here real quickly something that I wrote down in response to Timothy's question, because I get this question a lot and I've gone through it. So like the first thing I would say is loud and clear, right? Permission granted. As the self-declared king of permission granting, I grant Timothy, myself, and anybody else who needs it, full permission to stop consuming information and start doing, right? Full permission. And to be crystal clear, right? Nobody out there in the world needs my permission or anyone else for anybody else's permission for that matter. But if it helps to hear it, like permission granted with my permission granting wand. I actually think this is an incredibly exciting moment when this happens to you. And I've been here a number of times myself. In fact, I sort of cycle through it. Honestly, I cycle in and out of this phase quite a bit. I can feel it. I've learned to feel it when I'm starting to shift from what I think of as the consumption phase. You could also call that sort of research or learning, the consumption phase into and I actually think there's like a phase in the middle here, the consolidation phase, which I didn't talk a lot about. So consumption, consolidation. I'm going to talk specifically about moving from consumption to creation, right? When you hit that point, enough of consumption, right? That's kind of how I feel, like enough. Like I want to throw my phone out into the field out there, like, right? When you hit that phase, I think it's incredibly important. I have found it incredibly important to honor that feeling and lean into it fully. And here's sort of the step-by-step process that I use. Like step 1, turn everything off. Don't go. This is crazy, but permission granted. Don't go to the conferences. Don't attend mastermind groups. Stop listening to podcasts. Get off X, LinkedIn, Facebook. Literally turn off all the inputs. I've even had moments where I've decided if I'm going to listen to something, I'm only going to listen to one specific podcast or more. Like my favorite version of this is I pick like 2 or 3 long form books I've read before. Like one of my favorite go-tos during a phase like this is Pema Chodron's When Things Fall Apart. I love Greg McKeown's Essentialism, right? Sort of the sorts of, and then I can't remember the authors, but it's one of our favorite books at the Society of Advice, The One Thing, right? Those sort of like Deep Work from Cal Newport. Like listen to that on your walks or in the car, right? But one thing, like if you have to listen to it 2 or 3 times. So turn everything off except stuff that reinforces this idea. And even that I'd be careful with, really careful with. So really the big step 1 is turn everything off. 2, set aside some time for reflection. This could be an afternoon, could be a day, or even a couple of days off by yourself. I have a really good friend and fellow entrepreneur named Amy who specifically recently went away for 3 days to a cabin in the woods. It might even been longer, right? With this specific idea of like, I've gathered all this information. What should I do next? And we all go through this in micro. Anytime we have to make a decision, we do this exact same thing. Like gather information, then we get to the point where turn all the information off. Then number 2, set time aside for reflection. The goal is to create the space for it to occur to you. I sort of love the phrasing. Create the space, like put yourself at risk for good things to happen, right? So set time aside for reflection. Number 3, in that time, brainstorm this idea. Make a list. Write down all the things that you already know you should do, right? And often that requires you to be quiet because it's a little scary. Like, oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Because sometimes you have to face, at least for me, I have to face the reality that I've known that I need to be doing that and I haven't done it. So you don't need any new ideas, I don't think. You just need to act on the ones you've already got, Timothy, right? And if it helps, you could even like for example, right? You could even tie this to an annual process, right? Maybe you do this every year. Sometimes at the Society of Advice, we do this in Decembers. We have a big workshop called the One Thing Workshop, right? So you could tie it to something like that. Number 4, right? Rank your list. Now, this is really important. Prioritize the list in order of importance. One way I like to think of it is order of riskiness. And the way I think about risk here is which of these things, if I didn't do them, have the highest consequence of failure, right? And one way to think about failure is regret, right? Which item on the list would you regret the most if you didn't do it, right? So that's a way to view it in terms of riskiness, consequence of failure, and one way to view riskiness is through the lens of regret. So you've got this list of 8 things that you know you want to do. Rank them. Like, which one feels the most important? Which one would I regret if I didn't do the most? Which one has the highest consequence of failure, right? Like, move that one up. Number 5, determine the next micro action, right? Like, okay, I'm going to do this one first. What's the next smallest step I could take, right? Not the next step. And as David White says, not the step 2 or 3 out there, the one close in. Start close in, the smallest step, the one you're most scared to take, the smallest possible step to move forward. The smaller, the more micro, the better. I love micro actions. Micro actions, my definition of a micro action, something that feels so small it feels almost like you don't even need to do it. That's exactly what you should do. Number 6, after you've determined that step, number 6 is actually take that step, right? Take action. Now, number 7, after you take action, pay attention. As you move forward, actively look for new information to show up. Right? That doesn't mean going back into research mode, but rather being open to the insights that occur only while doing. You can't research this to get more information, right? You can't build another spreadsheet. You can't, it won't show up. This is the kind of information that is only driven by action. So, right? Number 6, number 5, you determine the next micro action. Number 6, you take the action. Number 7, you pay attention. Number 8, do it again, right? Take another step. Build momentum by repeating the process. Micro action after micro action. Number 9, repeat it, right? Keep taking those small steps. I know this all sounds so simple, not to be confused with easy. One of the reasons it's so simple, one of the reasons it's actually hard is precisely because it's simple, right? We expect it to be more complicated. So keep taking those steps. At some point, whether it's a month, a year, or maybe even the rest of your life, you might feel like it's time to shift back into learning mode. Like you might cycle back in like, okay, you know what? I did a bunch of stuff. I'm gonna sort of step back here for a little bit, go learn from others, watch some other things, read a bunch of new material. I'm increasingly convinced that there's a deep wisdom and some of the philosophers refer to this as primary imagination. There's a deep wisdom that exists within all of us already. We don't actually need a lot of inputs. And I'm trying to get better about this right now. Like I don't, and maybe it's because I've done so much consuming for the last 30 years that I don't need anymore. But I don't think that's it. I think there's actually a deep primary imagination that exists within all of us, where if we live with the questions that we're trying to answer, answers will show up. Right? Answers will show up. So be prepared to sort of phase in and out of this consumption consolidation, which we didn't talk much about, and creation phase and action phase. Now, one last thing I would think about, and I'm suggesting to Timothy too, is to pay attention to how this feels. Like if I go back to Timothy's original question. Let me pull that up real quick. Timothy's original question. I'm struggling with something that I think's great. I don't really want to go to conferences. I feel like I've done enough learning. I don't love the idea of adding more ideas. Is this crazy talk? To me, there's a lot in there around feeling. And I would pay attention to how that feels in your body. Like to me, I can feel like earlier, I can feel like wanting to throw the fields out there. Like I want to throw the phone, like, cause that's the tool of consumption. That kind of feeling to me, I can pay attention to that and be like, oh, last time I was here, it meant this. Maybe I need to go, set aside some time for reflection, come up with a list. Take some micro action. Maybe I need to turn everything off for a little while. Maybe I need to grant myself permission to stop consuming, right? So pay attention to what is telling you, like, what is the feeling you're having, right? Like it's so interesting to me that Timothy used these words. I don't really want. I feel like. What do you mean you feel like? Write that down. What does it mean you feel like? What does it feel like? If it was a color, what color would it be, Timothy? Right? Like, where do you feel it in your body? And the reason we're doing that is so we can recognize it next time. Spend a little time journaling this so that, like, next time you're at the same spot, this next time you're at this crossroads, you'll recognize it. I have a long ways to go in terms of recognizing, but it's like at least 3 decades I've been thinking about this. You know what I mean? So to Timothy and to anybody else who's feeling this way, and to myself, I'm in one of these phases right now. I'm like, throw the phone out there. This is a good time. Winter's a good time too, right? To turn everything off. The work you've done for this moment has prepared you for this moment. You've got everything you need. Like this is my new job, I feel like, is like convincing myself and anybody else who wants to follow along. You've got everything you need. You don't need any more gurus. You don't need any more mastermind groups. You don't need any more books right now. You've got everything you need. Trust yourself. Trust yourself. Because we all need what you're going to create. We all need what you're going to do. The people in your local community, the people that you serve as your clients, they need this work from you. So trust yourself. You've got it. You've got it. Cheers, my friends, and cheers, Timothy. I'm trying to find the button to hit the end of the record. So cheers.